His Excellency Kwon Hee-sok, Ambassador of the Mission of the Republic of Korea to ASEAN, His Excellency Ekapap Phantavong, Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN for ASEAN Social Cultural Community, His Excellency Nguyen Hai Bang, Permanent Representative of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam to ASEAN, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. Thank you for joining us at this online forum on the way forward for a stronger regional and international cooperation on marine plastic debris. This event is hosted by the Mission of the Republic of Korea to ASEAN in collaboration with the Regional Knowledge Center for Marine Plastic Debris, the RKC-MPD of ERIA, the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. Your presence here with us this morning is an affirmation that this is indeed an important topic that is close to our hearts. My name is TJ, and I will be your moderator for this forum. Before we proceed further, allow me to share some housekeeping rules to ensure that we have a fruitful session. While we have muted all participants as a default, please help us ensure that you remain muted throughout the event. Now, there is a chat box where we invite you to type in the questions that you may have for our speakers through the course of the forum. Please help us by identifying yourself first before sharing your question, and most importantly, who you would like to address the question to. We would also seek your support to complete a short survey at the end of the event. A QR code will be presented to you before the Q&A session to facilitate this. Thank you. Now, let me paint the context for this morning's forum. The ASEAN region is regarded today as one of the biggest contributors to marine plastic pollution due to rapid economic growth coupled with the lack of solid waste management infrastructure. At the groundbreaking 5th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, UNEA 5.2, held on March the 2nd this year in Nairobi, 175 nations endorsed a historic resolution proposing an internationally legally binding agreement to control plastic pollution by 2024. The resolution has its objectives to address the whole life cycle of plastic, from the production, design, to its disposal. In response to this urgent situation, many ASEAN countries have now adopted national action plans to tackle plastic waste, and ASEAN as a region has endorsed the Regional Action Plan for Combating Marine Debris in the ASEAN member states from 2021 to 2025. This was agreed in May of last year by the ASEAN Secretariat. Given the growing regional and international concerns, it is the desire of both the Mission of the Republic of Korea to ASEAN and the Regional Knowledge Center for Marine Plastic Debris of ERIA that today's forum will achieve the following objectives. Firstly, we hope to raise awareness of the current alarming situation. And then we want to take stock of the prevention and mitigation measures, the efforts that are currently undertaken by the different stakeholders. And finally, we hope to generate policy recommendations to advance the UNEA 5.2 resolution for a legally binding international treaty. To officially start this event, it is an honor and privilege that we have 3 distinguished ambassadors sharing their thoughts with us through their keynote speeches this morning. Let us first welcome His Excellency Kwon Hee-sok, Ambassador of the Mission of the Republic of Korea to ASEAN. His Excellency Kwon Hee-sok assumed the role as the Ambassador of the Mission of the Republic of Korea to ASEAN in March of this year. In his capacity, Ambassador Kwon is dedicated to further strengthening ASEAN and the Republic of Korea's relations and deepening the existing institutional ties encompassing political security, economic, and social cultural cooperation as envisioned in the ASEAN Community Vision 2025. Prior to arriving in Jakarta, he was the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary to the Republic of Italy from 2019 to 2021. In Korea, he has served as the Secretary to the President for National Security Strategy, as well as the Director General for African and Middle Eastern Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea. Previously, he has served as Director for Provincial Reconstruction Team in Afghanistan. He was a nuclear counselor at the Korean Mission to the UN in Vienna and First Secretary at the Korean Mission to the UN in New York. I would now like to invite His Excellency to give his keynote message. Sir, over to you, please.
Thank you very much. We are very pleased to have this great opportunity to collaborate with the ERIA, the renowned think tank representing ASEAN, actually working in the same building. We are physically neighbors. And also, I am very happy to see my close colleague, friend, Ambassador Nguyen Hai Bang of Vietnam. We are meeting very frequently here in Jakarta after last April when coronavirus has started to recede. Also very happy to see my national Professor Jang Yong-chul, who is a renowned expert on this particular issue. So Professor Jang, very good to see you and hopefully to see you physically in Korea or in Jakarta in the near future. His Excellency Nguyen Hai Bang, Permanent Representative of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam to ASEAN. His Excellency Ekapap Phanthavong, Deputy Secretary General of the ASEAN Secretariat for ASEAN Social Cultural Community. Colleagues and friends from many parts of the region. Good morning and warm welcome to you all. It's my great pleasure to host today's forum on marine plastic debris, one of the most imminent threats to our humanity and planet. Without significant action, there may be more plastic than fish in the ocean by weight by 2050, said a report published by MacArthur Foundation on the occasion of the World Economic Forum in 2016. At the time, many people doubted whether this gloomy and seemingly far-fetched projection would come into reality. However, a more recent report published by the United Nations Environment Programme in early 2021, entitled Making Peace with Nature, indicated with the scientific evidence that we are only getting closer to that gloomy future. The report said, I quote, "Marine plastic pollution has increased tenfold since 1980, constituting 60 to 80% of marine debris, and is found in all oceans, at all depths, and concentrates in the ocean currents. Without global intervention, the quantity of plastic in the ocean alone could increase to 100 to 250 million tons by 2025, end quote. With the COVID-19 pandemic tilting our lifestyle towards more consumption of single-use plastics, we might be rushing towards very dangerous future even more rapidly. There have been various efforts and cooperation to tackle the marine plastic debris issue in our region. ASEAN Regional Action for Combating Marine Debris 2021 to 25 is an exemplary case of such regional cooperation. The Korean government has assisted the ASEAN countries' efforts in this field by providing the cleanup vessels to Indonesia and the Philippines, and carrying out projects to enhance capacity of the riverside and coastal villages in the region in the area of marine litter monitoring and response. Furthermore, what we urgently need at this critical juncture is a more coherent and streamlined policy, which can integrate the existing efforts at the national, regional, and global level, while taking into account the full life cycle of plastics. As we are living in a world where plastics are ubiquitous, our efforts to tackle the issue, in order to be practical and effective, should be made by all the stakeholders, including governments, industries, businesses, academia, civil societies, NGOs, and so on. In this context, it could not be more timely and relevant for the United Nations Environment Assembly to adopt the resolution entitled "End the Plastic Pollution" towards an international legally binding instrument during its fifth session held in Kenya early this year. The Korean government strongly supports this international initiative and will proactively participate in the intergovernmental negotiation process. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today we invited many prominent experts from various fields and different countries. I sincerely hope that we can have productive and fruitful discussions and come up with many insightful policy recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Let us now welcome His Excellency Ekapap Fantavong, Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN for the ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community. His Excellency Ekapap Fantavong is the DSG of ASEAN for Social Cultural Community, a role he was appointed to in 2021 and will undertake through to 2024. He supports the Secretary General of ASEAN in the implementation of the ASCC Blueprint 2025 and leads the department of the ASEAN Secretariat. He oversees the implementation of projects under the ASCC that focuses on forging a common identity and building a caring and sharing society. DSG Fantavong has served numerous appointments at the Lao PDR Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Before assuming his current role, he was the Ambassador Permanent Representative of Lao PDR to ASEAN from 2018 to 2021. Prior to that, he served as the Deputy Director General of the ASEAN Department at the Lao PDR, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Ambassador Fantavong holds a Master's in International Relations from Flinders University, South Australia, and a Diploma in English Language from the Pedagogical University of Vientiane, Laos. Ambassador Fantavong conveys his regrets to us this morning because he's unable to join us, but he has prepared a video message for all of us. So let us just listen to what he has to share.
Excellency Kwan Hee-seok, Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to ASEAN. Excellency Nguyen Hai Bang, Permanent Representative of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam to ASEAN. Distinguished panelists, participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome all our distinguished participants to the online forum on the way forward for a stronger regional and international cooperation on the marine plastic debris. My appreciation goes to the Republic of Korea mission to ASEAN for the immense support and continuous cooperation in a very wide spectrum. My acknowledgement also goes to the regional knowledge center for marine plastic debris of the Economic Research Institute for the ASEAN and East Asia, or ERIA, for the excellent arrangements for this forum. ASEAN and the Republic of Korea has a long traditional and a close relationship in environment cooperation. Amongst others, both sides have agreed in the ASEAN RKC Plan of Action 2021 to 2025 to further advance the cooperation to combat plastic pollution and reduce marine plastic debris. This event is yet another milestones of regional efforts and enhance the partnership to promote new initiatives and add values to existing mechanisms in our resolve towards combating the plastic debris. It is also timely and aligned with the global efforts, notably the 5th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, UNEA 5.2, in March 2022, proposing an international legally binding agreement to address marine plastic debris by 2024. At the regional level, the forum will contribute to ASEAN's efforts to combat marine debris issues. It provides a platform to knowledge exchange, capacity building, and partnerships, which is in line with the priority areas identified in the ASEAN Regional Action Plan on the combating marine debris in ASEAN member states. The forum also offers an opportunity to formulate towards looking to insights and recommendations on related regional priorities, including green recovery efforts, blue economy, and the circular economy. The inputs from the forum will serve as a reference and feed into the implementation of the ASEAN Comprehensive Framework on the care economy, the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, and also the ASEAN Leaders Declaration, and also ASEAN Leaders Declaration on the blue economy. Noting the nature of the marine plastic debris issue is emerging to transboundary issue. I believe that the forum will also contribute to the ASEAN community's post-2025 vision. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, the ASEAN Secretariat continues to work collaboratively with the ASEAN member states and partners to strengthen and accelerate actions and cooperation. It is time for us to join hands and work together to translate the policies and plans into the strategic and integrated actions to tackle these mounting challenges. With shared vision and joint efforts, I am confident that we can continue to work together towards cleaner and healthier oceans. I wish this forum a grand success. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
We thank His Excellency Van der Wong for taking time to record the important message for us. I would now like to welcome His Excellency Nguyen Hai Bang, Permanent Representative of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam to ASEAN. Ambassador Nguyen Hai Bang is currently the Permanent Representative of Vietnam to ASEAN. He currently also sits as the representative of Vietnam to the Governing Council of the ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation. Previously, he was Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Social Republic of Vietnam to the Kingdom of Thailand from 2017 to 2020. Prior to being appointed as ambassador, Ambassador Nguyen was Director General of the Department of Africa and the Middle East from 2013 to 2017 at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam, where he also served as Deputy Director General prior to that. Ambassador Nguyen has also served in several appointments in different countries in Europe. He graduated from the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam in 1985 and had his postgraduate studies in the former Soviet Union. He also holds a Master of Public Policy from the Kennedy School of Government from Harvard University. Aside from his mother tongue, he is also quite a linguist. He speaks English, Japanese, and Russian as well. So let us welcome His Excellency Ambassador Nguyen Hai Bang to give his keynote speech. Sir?
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Your Excellency Nguyen Hee Sok, Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to ASEAN. Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, first of all, I'd like to express great appreciation to the mission of the Republic of Korea and the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia for co-organizing this meaningful forum. And thank you for inviting me to deliver the congratulatory remark. As the COVID-19 situation is easing and the summer is nearing, we are all looking forward to a trip to the sea, enjoying the beaches. Our trip would be more perfect if it is not to be marred by an inevitable sight of plastic water bottles and plastic bags in the sand or floating across the waves. Sadly, it will be the case wherever we go, be it Bali or Phuket, Langkawi or Phuket. It is so sad for all of us to realize that marine plastic debris has become so urgent a matter that we cannot look away globally and particularly in our region, Southeast Asia. It threatens the health of our ocean biodiversity, industries, and communities, as strongly emphasized in the Regional Action Plan for Combating Marine Debris 2021-2025, launched by ASEAN in late 2020. The ROK has long been an avid supporter of ASEAN in tackling environmental challenges. Cooperation in environment and sustainable marine economic development, supporting ASEAN's efforts to combat plastic pollution and reduce marine plastic debris, constitute a high priority in the ASEAN ROK Plan of Action 2021-2025. Our forum today is another endeavor initiated by the mission of ROK to assist ASEAN in tackling this challenge. And as the country coordinator for ASEAN ROK Partnership, Vietnam warmly welcomes the initiative of the ROK to organize this forum. Excellencies, dear friends, we believe that your interventions and discussion today will further help raising the awareness among the relevant stakeholders on the alarming situation we are facing. And we can look into concrete ways and means, our possible concerted efforts to address it. With that in mind, I wish our forum a remarkable success with substantive and realistic recommendations that can be distilled into our policy. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, the forum this morning comprises two sessions. In the first session, our distinguished speakers will help us take stock of the regional efforts currently undertaken to address marine plastic debris concerns. And the second session will then explore ways to strengthen regional and international cooperation. So to kick us off the first session, let us welcome Professor Suchana Apple-Chavanich. You know, Dr. Apple is currently... Let me rewind and start again. Dr. Apple is currently a professor at the Department of Marine Science, Faculty of Science at the Chulalongkorn University in Thailand. She has a broad base of ecological research interests that involve the study of nearshore species from tropical to polar regions. In addition, her research focuses on conservation and restoration of marine ecosystems and impact of climate change and marine debris on marine ecosystems. Currently, she has the projects related to marine biodiversity and polar research under the Royal Initiative of Her Royal Highness Princess Mahachakri Sirindorn. She's considered to be Thailand's first female scientist to go diving in the Antarctica and the Arctic. Her research work on Arctic Antarctica and coral reefs has inspired Thai and young people on the value of marine ecosystems. Because of her work, Dr. Apple has received several awards and recognitions both nationally and internationally. Let me just quickly name a few. She was given the Explorer Award by the National Geographic magazine Thailand, and also named as one of the 17 Asia Power Women of Inspiration, selected by her World magazine. Currently, Dr. Apple is also the Sustainable Ocean Ambassador, appointed by the UN AFMA FAO Annex. She received a doctorate in zoology at the University of New Hampshire, USA. So this morning, Professor Apple will be sharing more on the impact of plastics on marine ecosystems. Dr. Apple, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for the introductions. You can hear me well, right? Okay. You can hear me, right?
Yes, we can, Dr. Apple.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say that I'm honored and privileged to be here with you all today. So today, I would like to share with you on the impact of the plastic on the marine ecosystem. So next slide, please. Well, but first, do you know what era you are at now? We are actually not in a technology age, but we are now at a plastic age. Why? Because plastics are around us now. This means that plastics are very, very useful. But do you know that each minute we use the plastic bottle, at least 1 million bottles around the world. And each minute we use the plastic bag, at least 2 million bags around the world. And each day we use the 7,000 million stores around the world. It is a lot. But because of the human that didn't do a good job in the management of the plastic waste, and that made the plastic become a bad boy. So next slide, please. Well, unfortunately, Thailand and some Southeast Asian countries, we are now put into what we call the plastic gang. Put us in the top 10 list of the country that have a high amount of the marine plastic waste ending up into the ocean because of the mismanagement, which is not good. And not just only that, Thailand and other Southeast Asian countries also have a problem with importing of the plastic waste into their country. More than 27% of the plastic waste globally were imported into the Southeast Asian country. Next slide, please. Once the plastic gets into the oceans, it can kill the animal. More than 1 million of marine animals are killed each year because of the plastic waste in the oceans. And this picture actually, I took it in one of my study sites in Thailand. Next slide, please. And well, this is also another example. It's happened to the southern part of Thailand about 3 years ago. This whale was stranded on the beach, and when we dissect his stomach, we found a total of 85 plastic bags, big one, in a total of 8 kilos in his stomach. Next slide, please. And if those debris end up into the ocean, end up into the coral reef area, we will see this kind of situation, covering the coral and eventually make the coral die. Next slide, please. And because of the COVID, each country had tried very, very hard. Actually, before the COVID, each country have tried very, very hard to reduce the plastic waste. But COVID had reset the clock of the plastic because we have to work from home, right? And that make everything change and get worse. Next slide, please. Take a look at this one. Just only one meal that I order food at home for 4 persons. All is just plastic container. Next slide, please. And this data from Thailand, after we had a third wave of the COVID, we have 15% more of the plastic waste, 6,300 tons of the garbage created daily, and including 2 million face masks. And this actually increased because of 200% growth of the food delivery business. And actually, each food order produced at least 7 items of the plastic waste. So it is a lot. Next slide, please. Well, so what kind of impact that we can have from those plastic waste ending up into the ocean, end up into the sea? So actually it can divide into 2 kinds of effects. One is the physical effects and the other one is the biological effects. The example of physical effects such as entanglement that I just showed you earlier with the sea turtle, it could have a damage to the feeding activities or affect the mobilities. But for the biological effects, such as impair the health, delay the reproductions of the animals, and sometimes it can lead to the fatalities. Next slide, please. So what happened right now? So when the marine plastic pollution, actually what we found is not really contaminated in the ocean, but we also found that it's also contaminated in the environment in a form of the microplastic. So it's not just a big plastic now. We also can find it in a small plastic, which we call microplastic. And that microplastic can have effects to us, a human, because right now we can get the plastic that we throw away from the food, from the seafood that we eat, from the water that we drink, and from the air that we breathe. Next, actually the scientist has estimated that each of us now have at least 10,000 microplastic in our stomach. But we're not sure now what kind of impact of microplastic that we can have to the our health. Next slide, please. And these are the examples of how microplastic can affect different levels of individual of animal through the cell to organs and individual to the populations. It can also affect the enzymes activities and immunities of the animals, can affect the fecundities and behavior of animals, and eventually animal can die from the consumptions and ingestion of the plastic or microplastic. So not only that, we know that now microplastic can be found in our blood system in human. So now it's very get close to human, to us. Next slide, please. So last but not least, I would like to say that we now not only in a changing world, but we also in a very complex changing world. We not only have to face with those environmental pollution, but those new pandemic can also disrupt us, can make it worse, like the COVID that we just faced in the past 2 years. So no matter what law or regulation we have to reduce the plastic waste, the important is the individual, is us, whether we will do it or not. So it is time now to change our behavior, to change our mindset, to worry and to care about the environment as equal as care about ourselves. And definitely, all stakeholders have to work together. All the country have to work together. Because of there is no boundary for the plastic waste. And we will make sure that we will leave a better planet for our future generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Apple, for really painting to us the big picture and also for sharing with us some sobering statistics and also the cascading effects of marine plastic debris that will affect us as human beings as well. Indeed, like you said, in caring for the environment, we inevitably and ultimately care for ourselves as well. So thank you so much for sharing with us. I would now like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Wong Sok. Dr. Wong Sok is the head of the Environment Division, Assistant Director of the Sustainable Development Directorate within the ASEAN Secretariat. He's a passionate and dedicated environmental professional with over 20 years of global environmental compliance and governance experience, including in-depth knowledge on strategic environmental planning, environmental diplomacy, and operations control of environmental management systems. In education, he holds a bachelor's degree in forestry from Cambodia and a master's degree in environmental science and management from Belgium. He further completed a doctorate in impact assessment and climate change at the University of Western Australia. Dr. Wong Sok works extensively on environmental management in Southeast Asia, in close collaboration with government agencies, international organizations, development partners, CSOs, and communities. This has provided him with specific resources to direct and coordinate the strategic level and make significant impact and contributions to this region. He is unfortunately unable to join us in person, and he conveys his regrets this morning, but he has also kindly prepared a video presentation to share a little bit more with us about ASEAN's cooperation on marine plastic debris. If we could have the video, please.
Good morning, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. From ASEAN Secretariat side, we would like to thank to the mission of Republic of Korea to ASEAN in collaboration with the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia area. Organize this important event online forum, the way forward for a stronger regional and international cooperation on marine plastic debris. ASEAN Secretariat have a great opportunity to present to you all today about ASEAN regional cooperation in addressing marine plastic debris. So with that, I have some slides to share with you all. Next, please. Well, as you may know, Southeast Asia is quite, a long sort of coastal line and also with significant of biodiversity and resources that is come to a production of the fishery is significant. I think as you can see the figure, it's about some million ton of the fishery production. Next, please. ASEAN cooperation environment have been a long-standing cooperation with ASEAN member state and partner, but specifically with ASEAN Social-Cultural Community Blueprint 2025 that really stressed the most important priority for the strategic priority of ASEAN. So in that, it's specific key result area. It's really under the AACC Blueprint 2025. It's on the sustainable and inclusive, and specifically they have 4 key area. The conservation, sustainable management of biodiversity, environmental sustainable city, sustainable climate, and sustainable consumption production. Next, please. So with that, the AACC blueprint itself with the sustainability matter, we have really addressed this in the ASEAN strategy on the cooperation environment. And with that, we have clear 7 strategic priority and also the, which is really in line with the global priority, as you may see from the right-hand side, the SDG, CPD, and IG target, and so on, or PLX convention. Next, please. In order to make it work, we have an institutional framework for ASEAN Environment Cooperation. As you may have noted from other similar kind of structure with other ASEAN arrangement, we have minister level, senior official level, and then the working group level, which consists the 7 working group correspond to the 7 priority area. Next, please. So marine and coastal and marine environment itself, it's cross-cutting issue as well. From the key coastal marine environment priority, as you can see from the last column, it's really provide the key area that we very want to focus. But also other area of environmental sector, we have a sustainable city, which is try to do under sustainable urban planning, development, and climate resilience as well. And the chemical waste, which is very certain aspect, it really interact directly with the marine and coastal environment. Next, please. So some of you may have learned about this progress of ASEAN Environment Cooperation, particularly in addressing marine debris. We, ASEAN, under the special ministerial meeting on marine debris and the regional action on combating marine debris, and also with the support with partner, we have the EU support to ASEAN on circular economy under ERIA, and also we have a program of reuse, recycle to protect marine environment and coral reef. That is supported by the Germany and implemented by GIZ, ASEAN-Norway cooperation project on local capacity building, reducing plastic pollution in ASEAN region, ASEANO, and then ASEAN +3 cooperation on addressing marine debris. Next, please. So this the thing on the special ASEAN ministerial meeting on marine debris, SeminarㅅThe that happened on the 5th of March 2019 in Bangkok, Thailand. So with that, I think the minister come up with the important key document to guide ASEAN, which is about the Bangkok Declaration on combating marine debris in ASEAN region and ASEAN framework of action on marine debris. Next, please. So with that, in order to implement specific activity, ASEAN Regional Action Plan for combating marine debris was developed and also official launch on the 28th May 2021, consists of 14 action in line with the 4 components, as you can see below, of ASEAN framework of action. The step forward in order to implement that, we have 3 important steps. First one, we have a planning phase, which is enabling condition, including the setup of institutional resource mobilization, communication, coordination strategy, and baseline development in order to translate this regional action plan into the practical sort of operational process. And then we have implementation phase, which is importantly establishment task force, advisory group, and monitoring unit, as well as the in collaboration with the other coordinated body. And we have also monitoring, reporting, evaluation phase, which is it's sort of follow-up activity to make sure we are really achieve our target. Next, please. Here, the ASEAN Regional Action Plan for combating marine debris, that is for 2021 to 2025, and in particular, with that, I mean, it's clearly spell out the way how ASEAN try to do. And first one, try to reduce the input into the system, which is to the river, to the sea, to and so on. And then second thing, to enhance the collection and minimize leakages, because the situation leakage also significant, and create value for waste to be reused as a part of circularity of the plastic. Next, please. Here is the detail of the proposed action in of the regional action plan. That's clearly spell out how we're going to reduce input into the system, how we can enhance the collection and minimize leakages and create value for the waste reuse. Next, please. As you may have learned recently under the Brunei Chairmanship 2021, I think ASEAN leader develop ASEAN leader declaration on blue economy. This is the key area that elaborate in that ASEAN leader declaration, that the leader agree to explore the cooperation of blue economy, which is focused also marine environment protection, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, marine coastal ecosystem protection, sustainable aquaculture and fishing practices, sustainable production, consumption, and so on and so forth. So really in line and really re-emphasize the priority and importance of marine and coastal environment. Next, please. So the way forward, I think this the key message I would like to share with you as three important piece of the work that we need to look together and work together. One is about seamless collaboration among partner and stakeholder, because this is the way we try to do address marine plastic debris. It's come from multiple sources and also impact multiple sort of receptor that involve multiple sector and player. So we need to have proper coordination and collaboration with all key players in order to address from upstream to downstream process. Second thing, you may learn also from the recent global framework unified resolution, that is, and also the BLS and the Basel Convention. All that thing is really some of our ASEAN member states and all that are part of that sort of international commitment that we need to align with our action as well. So this is the way we try to align our commitment and action on the ground. The third part is about transparent, effectiveness, regional policy framework and mechanism, because I think when it comes to waste trade, it comes to the trade of the plastic-related matter, it really sometimes it's about a business opportunity and a competition among other, and particularly private sector as well. So with that, I think we can see the transparency, effectiveness, and of the regional policy framework and mechanism as it's necessary in order to facilitate a cross-border and also transboundary sort of management of that issue. Thank you. Next slide, please. I think thank you very much. That ends from my presentation, and I hope that today forum will provide important insight and discussion about the way forward, how we strengthen our cooperation. And ASEAN Secretariat stand ready to working with you all. And if any matter, please reach out to us, and then we can discuss more detail how we can work together in the meaning of multi-stakeholder engagement process of ASEAN strategy. Priority. Thank you very much.
We thank Dr. Wong Sok for taking time to prepare the insightful presentation for us. Indeed, even as a global framework is put in place, there's a need for it to be translated into transparent and effective regional action plans and mechanisms. And finally, for there to be that collaboration, not just between public and private, but public, private, and the people sectors as well. So thank you, Dr. Wong Sok. I'm pleased to now welcome our third speaker for the first session, Mr. Park Joo-yong from the Korean Marine Environment Management Corporation. Mr. Park is the International Affairs Specialist of the Marine Litter Management Center within the Korea Marine Environment Management Corporation. In his current role, he has implemented international public awareness projects on behalf of the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries of Korea, and has been involved in organizing several bilateral and multilateral conferences, workshops, and meetings. During his tenure with the Global Agricultural Development Center of the Konkuk University, He was involved in the Korea International Cooperation Agency's ODA project on agricultural education training for Solomon Island officials, in addition to undertaking various public relations and media-related projects. Mr. Park graduated with a Bachelor of Public Administration from the Konkuk University in Seoul, Korea. I will now hand over the floor to Mr. Park, who will be sharing with us on the collaborative efforts towards zero marine debris in the ASEAN region. Mr. Park, please.
Thank you very much for your introduction. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I am Chuyung Bak from Korea Marine Environment Management Corporation, KOEM. I am so delighted to take a part in this wonderful forum where all of us gather to share insights and discuss marine debris issue. And I would just like to take a moment to thank Mission of the Republic of Korea to ASEAN and of course ERIA for arranging this amazing event. Today, I will briefly talk you through what our organization KOEM does to build a bridge between Republic of Korea and ASEAN countries and to further enhance the cooperation in ASEAN region in order to tackle marine debris issue. First things first, let me just quickly go over the recent development we had in the global marine debris community. As all of you are already aware, we had a historic moment in the latest UNEA, and the resolution for a legally binding instrument for marine plastic was adopted. After we go through a few steps laid ahead of us, such as INC, we can get closer to the plastic-free ocean more than ever. Apart from the legally binding nature of the resolution, the document also highlights that we should continue to enhance international and regional cooperation. In fact, regional cooperation will be required even more because marine plastic issue cannot possibly be solved by a few countries, but plastic-free ocean can only be achieved through participation from all countries and the global or regional level of collaborative work. So it is really crucial to ensure that all of the countries achieve the same or at least a similar level of marine plastic reduction. And in order to do that, all countries should work together and share best practices to address marine plastic issue. And ASEAN, as one of major regional framework, should also find a way to enhance regional cooperation. And in this regard, the Republic of Korea had a joint project with the Indonesian government to enhance regional cooperation in ASEAN. And the name of the project is Strengthening and Improvement for Marine Debris Response in Indonesia. The main goal of this project is to enhance the capacity of Indonesia to tackle marine debris issue through offering comprehensive knowledge on marine debris policies and marine debris monitoring education program. And about $500,000 are invested to this project, and the project was carried out from 2019 to 2021. And the target area of this project is a place called Labuan Bajo. It's located in the eastern part of Indonesia, and this is where it is. Okay, here are the major components of the project. I think I will just take you through them by one. The first component of our project is a capacity building workshop. Every year we held a workshop in Indonesia, and we invited as many stakeholders as possible, especially Indonesian government officials who are in charge of marine debris policies of Indonesia, as well as local residents and NGOs of Indonesia. And through the capacity building workshop, we provided the participants with knowledge on marine debris policies and how to conduct marine debris monitoring. The second component is to implement the pilot marine debris monitoring at coastal area of Labuan Bajo. So we carried out marine debris monitoring with the participants who came to the workshop. As you know, marine debris monitoring is a key to measure and understand the marine plastic pollution level. So we conducted a joint marine debris monitoring project with the Indonesian participants in Labuan Bajo in 2019 and 2021 to see how much plastic there is, and this is the map of the spots where we did the research. Last but not least, the ultimate goal of this project was to establish the guideline for a marine debris monitoring method that can be effectively implemented in Indonesia, so that Indonesian government can carry out monitoring project on their own. So we finished the monitoring guideline in 2021 and safely delivered it to the Indonesian government. And we are anticipating that this guideline will bring some positive changes on Indonesian marine debris policies, and I'm hoping that it will help them to figure out the plastic pollution level of the ocean. Please let me quickly touch upon the results of the monitoring research we did. According to the research, the most common marine debris item found in Labuan Bajo is, of course, plastic. So when we analyze the data by the number of marine debris, plastic is by far the most dominant component, accounting for 86% of all marine debris collected in Labuan Bajo. And when we analyze the data by the weight, still plastic shows the highest figures. So we could conclude that plastic is the biggest factor causing marine debris pollution in Labuan Bajo. Then what is the most common plastic item found in the targeted area? Here's the list of 10 most common plastic items. As you can see, plastic bottle and bottle caps have the first place. Actually, the picture is on the top right here. And the second most common item was thin plastic film on the bottom right. It's like a long plastic tube containing ice cubes, and local fishermen in Indonesia use this plastic film to keep the fish in a good condition. So the biggest takeaway we could get was that we should establish policies to reduce the usage of these two items. And this is exactly why we must do marine debris monitoring in the first place, to observe and analyze what the biggest problem is so that we can start to work on that. So that was it for the joint project between Korea and Indonesia. The project was a huge success, but since it was only planned to last for 3 years, we wrapped up the project last year. That being said, the Republic of Korea is, of course, not stopping here. We keep seeking out for a new opportunity to enhance regional cooperation on marine plastic debris in ASEAN region. So a new project is under development, and the name of the project is Enhancement of Marine Debris Management in Manila Bay, Philippines. The basic concept and the bottom line of the project is pretty similar to the Indonesian project I just mentioned. Korea will provide a capacity building program on marine debris policies and monitoring research. But this time, along with all these contents and components, we will try to build a ship that can collect marine debris in the ocean and provide it to the government of Philippines. We are hoping that this project will be as helpful as the joint Indonesian project, and Korea and Philippines are working hand in hand to develop the project at the moment. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. Please let me know if there is any question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Park, for sharing with us the details of that pilot project, and more importantly, the desire to continue to engage this region in really just building capacity and also sharing expertise. Before we continue with the second session, if you have any questions for our participants, if you have any questions for our speakers, please do type them into the chat box. Our team will be collating them for the Q&A session later. We also want to invite you to follow the social media pages of both the Mission of the Republic of Korea to ASEAN, as well as the Regional Knowledge Center for Marine Plastic Debris. I know some has already been shared. We will be sharing more of this in the chat box as well. So this will allow you to keep abreast of all the great work that they are doing in this area. Now, in the second session of this forum, we want to explore ways where we can strengthen regional and international cooperation. And we look forward also to the various policy recommendations that will be coming forth from our speakers, for further deliberation. So let me just jump right in and invite and welcome our first speaker, Dr. Mushtaq Ahmed Memon. Dr. Mushtaq Ahmed Memon is the Regional Coordinator for Chemicals and Pollution Action Sub-Program with the United Nations Environment Program, the Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. He's working with UNEP for more than 17 years and, including 11 years at the UNEP IETC for water and sanitation and waste management. He has worked as Director for Rural Water Supply and Sanitation in Pakistan for 4 years and served as a port engineer for about 6 years. At the ROAP, he served as the Sub-Program Coordinator for Resource Efficiency. And he led the UNEP's COVID-19 response on medical and humanitarian phase, focusing on COVID-19 waste management. Dr. Mushtaq served also as a project manager for the regional policy advocacy component of the EU-funded Switch Asia program to promote sustainable consumption and production, as well as uptake of SDG number 12 in Asia. He has further implemented the Goal 4 SDGs in the region and led the Low Carbon Lifestyle Challenge startups. He has a doctorate in environmental and resource economics from Hiroshima University in Japan, a master's from the University of Bradford in the UK, a postgraduate diploma in transport, and an undergrad in civil engineering from Pakistan. He has also published various papers in international journals and has delivered various training programs. This morning, Dr. Mushtaq will be sharing with us on the UNEA resolution to end plastic pollution, including in marine environment. Dr. Mushtaq, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And, good morning, Excellencies and delegates. So let me share my screen, please.
Dr. Mushtaq, the presentation slides will be put up for you.
Oh, so it's from your side?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I stop share here. Okay, thank you. So as we are now, I call it a new era of plastic pollution management, including in the marine environment, as we have seen this whole big UNEA resolution. So now my main focus will be how ASEAN can really work together for this new resolution to come up with a new global instrument to manage plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. Next slide, please. Can I move my slides? Okay. So as you may recall, because it was just in February, so that there was a lot of negotiations, discussion behind the scenes to bring this resolution on the table for approval. Because as we know that there are different countries having the different geographic, climatic, socioeconomic, demographic situations, having different concerns, as well as the different potentials for plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. So there was a lot of negotiations behind the doors and from north, south, east, west, and finally all agreed. And that was a huge, I think, win for all of us, all the countries, that this resolution was passed, focusing on creating intergovernmental negotiating committee that would help to compile or develop the global instrument, and that will be this INC role is up to 2024. And we already saw the first open-ended working group held in Dakar in Senegal towards the end of last month. And then also the next one will be now in Uruguay. So in ASEAN, there's a lot of interest to come together. And we saw like starting from Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Cambodia, and so on. So we saw a lot of like a pull and push now. So how we can help or work together, and big thanks to the ASEAN Secretariat and also the partner countries like Republic of Korea, Japan, and People's Republic of China, and so on. So we can really see how we can come together with ASEAN's help for this. Next slide, please. To do so, the 5 important points are in focus. First of all, as the executive director of UNEP put all these 5 together in her opening speech in Dakar, that we need to build a broad instrument so that it is just not taking around the edges of the problem. If you may like to recall other multilateral environmental agreements, most of those are more or narrowly focused or deep dive to the issue, whether it be the mercury like Minamata, whether it be the illegal or transboundary movement of hazardous waste under the Basel or POPs in Stockholm, and so on. So this time, the focus was that how we can bring whole life cycle, whole value chain of plastic in focus, not just end of the plastic waste and the impact of the plastic waste on the marine environment or over the land and so on. So it was like addressing across the value chain. And if you're talking about across the value chain, first is that we need to have more information, science, that how the plastics are being produced, what type of plastics are being produced, what type of plastic products are being produced, who are the consumers, how they are being consumed, how they are being discarded, how they are being, in the current situation, managed, collection, waste, recycling, incineration, so on, and how much leakages and how it's going to ending up in our environment. So basically this whole science is very important to see that how this is happening and who are the major stakeholders, whether the producers upstream, whether it be the suppliers, consumers, whether it be the waste management services downstream, recyclers, and so on. So that's why the third point was that have a close engagement and the involvement of the stakeholders, including, as we saw the first time, there's a lot of a pull and push on the private sector and civil society to engage them this whole process. And then on the solution side, based on this all like a problem tree analysis, as I put up there, then the fourth one is basically the solution side to look on the new economy. It's not just to give an end of pipe solution to the plastic pollution, but to see how the circular economy, the new economy, the green jobs, the way we consume plastics, including in, let's say, automobiles and aeroplanes and so on, because it have a lot of benefits like in health care and so forth. So how this new economy can help to really create more productivity or quality of plastics production and use, but also more important to recirculate back into economy so we do not have any leakages, because recycling is the last or least preferred option, because it again needs a lot of resources and it has a lot of secondary environmental impacts from the water consumption, energy consumption, and also losing the original level of the plastics and so on. So basically, upstream was more in this new economy, and then how we can recycle back whatever cannot be reused or extended in the lifespan. So then the whole point was that how this new solution can be implemented. And that brings us to the fifth point, that we have to learn from the multilateral agreements, as I already mentioned about the Basel Convention, Stockholm, Rotterdam, or the Minamata, and so on. But more important to see, on the one hand, those conventions also addressing plastics already, like Basel, for example, or even on the Convention on the Migratory Species, we are working on the impacts of the plastic pollution in marine or river environments on the migratory species and so on. So basically, we have to partner with all the multilateral environmental agreements to create the complementarity, not to duplicate, not to reinvent the wheel. So this is very important, that how this new economy focusing on the plastic production to the plastic pollution, how we can really help each other and using or taking advantages all the multilateral environmental agreements, the regional fora, including the ASEAN. And again, big thanks to all my colleagues in ASEAN. We have been working very closely for so many years or even decades to really help this. So this is very important. Next slide, please. So to support the countries in the region from UNEP, we have quite many projects. And again, big thanks to the donors and partners like Japan's funded projects on the plastic-free rivers in Mekong, for example. It's an enormous amount of science generated, the stakeholder engagement and so on. And now in the new phase, we are doing the riverine communities resilience on the plastic and climate on the Mekong. And then the second project with the SEDA support on the sea circular, that is quite upstream on the plastic value chain, involving IPOs, private sector recyclers and producers and so on. Then as EU funded, Switch Asia for sustainable consumption and production for last almost 15 years is with us, and that's really has created a lot of impact. And we currently did assessment of the SCP in ASEAN, and then plastics comes as one of the major sectors for that. Then recently the Germany funded Go for SDGs, where we supported even the consultations for Stockholm plus 50. And like again, Japan funded through the One Planet or 10YFP, the startups. Again, if you look on the youth, because youth is the key for the plastics value chain, how really we make a big dent. Because youth on the consumption side, as you may know, and more important, also youth on the innovation side, on the startup sides, on the creating the shared economy for plastics value chain and so on. So this is very important. Then also with the IKI project in Philippines on the plastics and tourism. And then also we are trying to now push a little bit of our knowledge and getting the support from the countries in ASEAN to help also Pacific. And finally, as COVID-19 and the plastic plight was really, really high, as we saw in all ASEAN countries. So how to create the resilience that if this situation comes again, how we are resilient not to create the plastic plight. Next slide, please. So there are a lot of key knowledge products out of these projects available online, and if you are interested, I can share you. Because of interest of time, I will not go in all those, but as I mentioned, they like really address everything, like a plastic in the rivers, including even in their impacts on the migratory species, for example, including even the new protocols for monitoring in Mekong River, and so on. Next slide. And as I mentioned, that we work across the stakeholders and across the value chain and across the different ways, like awareness raising, information tools and education tools, for example, regulations and policies sharing the best practices, technology transfer support to create the platforms for that, for example, business models, sustainable or green financing, including environmental, social governance, investments, and so on. So this is very important, that how you bring this three-dimensional support on the table. Next slide, please. And finally, as one of the key outcomes for Southeast Asia's plastic management project, which we are working with the support from Sweden, is really a great way to look how the private sector can be involved in this journey, because at the end of the day, it's about the profit making for the private sector. And if you turn the profit making by reducing the plastic pollution, they are already on board. Next slide. So I would like to again thank everyone, including the host like Korea, ERIA, ASEAN, all the countries, excellencies, and we are available at your service anytime. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mushtaq. Indeed, there is a recurring theme that is coming from the various speakers, and that is the need for multi-stakeholder engagement. And I think this is very important, even as we continue to address this issue. And for our next presentation, we have two speakers sharing with us, Dr. Yulu Liu and Ms. Lim Ching Ling. Let us welcome them. Dr. Yulu Liu is a policy consultant at the Center for International Law at the National University of Singapore. She finished her doctorate at the Australian National Centre for Ocean Resources and Security, University of Wollongong. Her research areas include marine environmental protection, marine plastic pollution, and the law of the sea. And Ms. Lim Ching Ling is a research associate who joined the Ocean Law and Policy team in CIL to support the development of a regional knowledge organization system for marine environmental data. Her focus areas are marine environmental databases and portals, marine aquaculture, pollution from marine plastics, as well as the development of regional research networks. Dr. Liu and Ms. Lim will be looking into the policies on single-use plastics restrictions in the ASEAN region and their effectiveness. Dr. Liu and Ms. Lim, please.
Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished guests, and fellow peers. I'm Chin Ling, and with me is my colleague from National University of Singapore, Centre for International Law, Yulu Liu. Our dear colleague, Ms. Yuna Lyons, is unable to join us today. I will now begin the presentation. This is a quick overview of our presentation's contents today. Sorry. Most of our focus will be on our findings section. But before we jump into the topic, I would like to clarify that for the purpose of our discussion, we have defined single-use plastics to include food packaging, plastic bottles, bags, microbeads found in cosmetic products, and other one-time usage plastic items. We begin with our data source, which is the Regional Research Inventory 2.0. This inventory houses marine plastic research on the ASEAN +3 that have been published between 2001 and mid-2021. As of February, the inventory contains 702 publications. It is a great research effort that could not have been achieved without our regional research team. And once again, we would like to show our appreciation for their contributions. So this is our data source. And through looking through the articles in the inventory, we found that food packaging are among the top 10 reported sources of marine plastic litter items studied. We also found that plastic bottles, bags, food packaging items are among commonly reported single-use plastic items in the regional water bodies. Policy, legal, and regulatory research also forms a significant portion of our inventory. And with the relevance of our inventory established, we review the publications within, extracted a subset of papers that examine existing regulatory policies in the region, and all provided elements to evaluate effectiveness of regulatory policies. Then we analyze the contents using our model, which Yulu will elaborate upon.
Thank you, Chin-Ling. And next, we would like to revisit this conceptual chart, which we already presented during the last ERIA Expert Working Group meeting. This chart intends to demonstrate different phases from the announcement of an intervention to the achievement of decrease in plastic pollution as an ultimate goal. First, what policy instruments and what specific measures are decided to be taken. And second, at the implementation stage, it can be evaluated through the identification of regulations or other types of measures, as well as what is the geographic scope that this intervention covers. And for the mechanisms for feasibilities, a policy restriction can be evaluated through the level of acceptance, the number of outreach activities, and what is the public's response to economic incentives. And here in stage 4, we have an indicator to measure unwanted consequences from prior intervention. And stage 5 is about the level of participation at the compliance stage. And stages 6, 7, and 8, they are all about decrease in plastic pollution, but in different dimensions. Stage 6 is to measure avoided pollution from this intervention. And stage 7 is to measure decrease in plastic pollution at a specific area. And stage 8 is to evaluate the general decrease in plastic pollution in the geographic scope that this intervention covers. And findings from all indicators should be used to revisit through monitoring and surveying overall, as the pink arrow here at the bottom indicates. And from our observation of our inventory, common measures taken by regional states are bans on single-use plastics. Prohibition usually includes bans on certain types of single-use plastics, like thin plastic bags, plastic cutlery, and plastic used in food packaging and delivery. As already mentioned by many presenters before, the COVID-19 pandemic added to the difficulties of this issue because the pandemic has led to a huge increase in the demand for single-use plastics, especially for medical use. So more regional research is expected to evaluate the intensified pressure on the plastic waste problem. And so we can add it to our inventory later. And for economic incentives, here we wanted to see whether there are any return schemes for recyclables established and studied in the region. But relevant information is quite scattered, and these schemes are usually initiated by startup companies, but there have not been observations of such practice at the national level. This gap in recycling facilities directs our attention to the informal waste management sector, which is quite critical in the region. And for microplastics, which is an emerging issue that has attracted attention from both policy and science sides, research on microplastics has revealed the negative impacts on human health, but these research results have not yet been reflected in common policies in the region. But we have to point out that South Korea already issued a ban on the use and sale of plastic microbeads in all cosmetics in 2017, and later it banned the use of microbeads in toothpaste and detergent in 2021. And here we're trying to apply what we have found in our inventory and to the model we proposed. So to evaluate the effectiveness of single-use plastic bans, we can be looking at what is the geographic scope of such a ban. Is it a national one, or is it only limited to certain areas or cities in the nation? And what are the economic incentives taken to promote the feasibility of such a ban? And is there any increase in the production of big plastic and non-degradable plastic bags, which is an unwanted consequence that we want to avoid? And very straightforwardly, how many cities or what is the number of participants that have participated in outreach activities to enhance and promote the level of participation? And what are the numbers of plastic bags that are avoided, so they're not distributed to consumers because of such a ban? And overall, the general findings of single-use plastic policies in the ASEAN +3 regions are that the regulations do not focus on all types of single-use plastics. Instead, they focus on specific applications like thin plastic bags, bottles, and they're often limited to certain geographic areas. And the mechanisms for compliance, monitoring, and enforcement could be enhanced. And usually consumers are the primary focus of these regulations. But here we suggest that regulations can be designed to target other sectors of activities like manufacturing, agriculture, tourism, and construction. And there was a lack of information on return schemes and other economic incentives. And funding appears lacking for research on new interventions and the evaluation of effectiveness. And lastly, here we will briefly talk about the ongoing discussion and the coming negotiation of the Global Plastic Treaty. ERIA has consistently affirmed in its resolutions the urgent need to strengthen global coordination, cooperation, and governance to take immediate actions towards the long-term elimination of plastic pollution in marine and other environments, and of avoiding detriment from plastic pollution to ecosystems and the human activities dependent on them. And of course, in Union 5.2, a resolution was adopted with a very ambitious goal to complete the work of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee by the end of 2024. And here we think that the negotiation of the new treaty is expected to include regulations, definitions, and guidance on upstream processes, which are of huge relevance to the regional context. And regional best practices in single-use plastic interventions could also contribute to the discussions at the international level. And ASEAN +3 region as a global hotspot of plastic pollution, countries' perspectives and national interests raised during the negotiation are going to be very critical during the negotiation process of the global treaty. And this is the end of our presentation. We really look forward to your comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Liu and Ms. Lim, especially for your findings as well as the different recommendations that you have suggested in that particular slide. Ladies and gentlemen, do not forget to type in the questions that you may have for our speakers in the chat box. It has been a very insightful session we've had so far this morning. And the Q&A session will be a very good opportunity for you to, glean even more insights from our speakers. So we do not want you to miss the opportunity to engage with our speakers through your questions. To move on, let me now welcome our next speaker, Mr. Edwin Seah. Mr. Edwin Seah is a strategic and sustainability communications consultant with over 20 years of senior level experience and serves on the board of advisors for ERIA Private Limited, a Singapore-based packaging, design, and sustainability solutions company. His experiences span across regional public policy, sustainability, and strategic communications for government, industry, and non-profits. He co-authored the Sustainable Packaging Roadmap 2020 to 2024 for members of an industry association and helped to push out an industry-led and region-first model, process, and material standard for the use of rPET in food-grade packaging. He was instrumental in helping to establish the Circular Materials Lab, a packaging innovation platform to accelerate the discovery and adoption of next-generation food-grade packaging, and led a partnership with the UNEP to undertake a regional study on tackling plastic waste in Southeast Asia. Edwin will be sharing with us this morning about the application of Extended Producer Responsibility System, or the EPR, in ASEAN. Edwin, the floor is yours.
Thanks, DJ, for the introduction. Good morning, everybody, and thank you to ERIA for having me here to share my views on EPR. If we could have my first slide, please. the opening slide. Thank you. I particularly like this picture in not such a nice way, because I think it really tells the situation right now, right? So if you look at the top left picture, we've got mismanaged waste infrastructure. And then the bottom picture, you have the dependence on the informal sector to help deal with our waste problem. On the top right, you can see plastics production, and that's really a function for the last few years of cheap plastics. And the bottom right is the last point of entry, if you would, the lack of proper barriers for preventing plastics and other waste from entering our waterways. Next slide, please. So perhaps just a very quick recap of how we got here in the first place with this marine plastics debris problem. As I mentioned in the first cover slide, the failure of waste management systems and the lack of proper infrastructure. And of course, I know the second point, plastic waste imports, many countries in the region have stopped that for quite a few years, but we've already had a pile-up, if you would, of many years of importing waste and not processing them properly. As I mentioned, you've got a heavy dependence on the informal sector, and I will share a little bit more why I think that could potentially be a problem in the effective implementation of EPR. The fourth point is something that I discovered in my previous organization, Food Industry Asia, when we did a study in 2018. We discovered that a lot of the solutions in the region have been fairly small scale. Small scale meaning they don't really create significant impact on improving the situation. Largely uncoordinated, both at national and regional levels. And then the other point that I made about cheap plastics, that's a problem, because when you have cheap plastics going over, for example, sustainable alternatives or even recycled plastics, that's going to be a problem. The other point, which I think is rarely not talked about, is the importance of the plastics industry in many countries in Southeast Asia, even in my home country, Singapore, potentially providing, therefore, a policy conflict of interest in really wanting to deal with the situation upstream, if you would. And of course, the last point, as we all know, COVID-19 has exacerbated the problem. It's created more plastic usage and therefore waste. But at the same time, 2 years of movement restrictions mean that opportunities to clean up the mess has been really restrictive. Next slide, please. And so we go quickly into EPR. So EPR is not new in ASEAN. It's not new in Southeast Asia. In fact, if you look back, some countries have EPR in their policy, in their national regulation, as early as 2008. And several countries have EPR legislated in policy. So the question remains then, with EPR being in legislation in many ASEAN member states for years, how come you don't see it implemented in the way that it should? So I would venture to speculate quite a few problems around it: the design of EPR, who is responsible, the implementation, the monitoring, the reporting, and of course the enforcement of EPR. And even in Singapore, again, we were talking about introducing a deposit refund scheme as part of EPR for beverage containers, which was supposed to be introduced this year. It was pushed back by a year to next year, but I understand the latest is that it could be pushed further back because of economic uncertainties brought on by COVID-19. But the good thing is that in several countries in the region, notably Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia, the industry has come together to develop what you call packaging responsibility organizations. So I think that is a good start, and it provides a good base for eventual EPR to take off. The next slide, please. So my point is actually, perhaps we need a rethink of EPR in ASEAN, or at least the way that EPR is being currently implemented in the EU, in the US, whether that same model can apply to ASEAN, or whether we need to tweak it a little bit. And my start point is that to begin with, EPR, I believe is a misnomer, because we all know that marine plastic debris is not a single point problem where you can put the blame on any single party along the value chain. It's really a value chain responsibility. And I like this term. I first heard it from Trace, this NGO in Indonesia. I don't know whether they invented this phrase, but I first heard it from them. And I think it's much more appropriate. It's extended stakeholder responsibility, which goes back to identify that stakeholders along the value chain are responsible, not just producers or brand owners. So again, EPR, I believe, in the way that we currently see it being applied in the EU, in the US, might not be fit for purpose for ASEAN in the present moment, and for three big reasons. If you look at EPR in the way it's implemented in the US, in the EU, they have three things going for them which ASEAN member states don't. So one is a high rate of compliance, monitoring, and enforcement. The other is, of course, they have a very high level of formal waste management system. And you know, as ASEAN itself identified in its regional action plan document, more than 50% of waste in ASEAN is uncollected, and even of those collected, less than a quarter is recycled. So therefore, for these three reasons, I think it's going to be very difficult to implement EPR in ASEAN, or to see it effectively being run in the current state because of the lack of these three critical criteria. Next slide, please. So I feel, again, very strongly there's a big role for government to play in terms of EPR, but also in terms of managing marine plastic debris. And I believe, and I don't mean this in a offensive way to governments, and I know there are quite a few government representatives here, but I think EPR should not be seen by governments as a way to absolve them of some of their basic duties. Just like any government will provide basic healthcare, education, roads, infrastructure, I think they should view providing waste management services and infrastructure as a basic responsibility of government to undertake. And I believe also the time has come to move away from best practices, voluntary actions, guidelines, to a more mandated approach in terms of dealing with marine plastic debris. So the third point, and this is something that Singapore has introduced, I think a couple of years already, is a mandatory packaging reporting requirement for all companies who are using plastics and any sort of packaging material, to report your usage, to report how are you disposing of that or recycling that. So I think that forms a very important mandate that all ASEAN member states should adopt. And to my next point, the fourth point is, again, you know, we really should look beyond voluntary measures, because I started working on this issue 2018, and granted we had 2 years of disruption for COVID, but now we're in 2022, about 4+ years. I don't really see the situation of marine plastic debris improving in the region, because I feel that there's a lack of mandates and stronger regulations. And so again, the last point about government, I feel, is you know, they really need to come in to stem the flow of plastics upstream. Of course, downstream, they need to clear up what's already there. And yeah, the infrastructure in preventing more from entering our waterways and the marine environment needs to be done. And I think government needs to take some leadership in this. My next slide, please. And so there are some opportunities, of course. I do feel that the way we are right now, and for some of the points I highlighted, we are maybe another 5 years at best before EPR can be effectively implemented again in the way that it's being done in the West. But let's all remember that EPR is not a silver bullet, right? It's not going to solve our problems immediately if we just think that, oh, EPR is the solution, here is the anecdote. It's not. So the other point that I would like to highlight is that back when I was with Food Industry Asia, a study was commissioned to look at 4 ASEAN countries on how we can help to reduce plastic waste. And I think it was identified that annually about 800,000 tons could be dealt with if they look at some of the solutions that was shared in that study. And so I think those solutions, while it came out in 2018, still very valid today. And as some of the speakers have identified, with the ASEAN Regional Action Plan and with the UNEA 5.2 resolution, we are in a prime position to finally make a big significant move on dealing with the situation. So I go to my last 2 slides, which next slide please, which is on my recommendations and how I view things. Oh, sorry, this one is just the a slide I took from the study from Food Industry Asia I mentioned. And you look at the 4 countries that we covered, and you can tell that each of the studies or the countries will look at different solutions. So it's not a blanket solution for everyone. Indonesia, maybe the top one is increased collection services. In the Philippines, it could be materials recovery facilities. But collectively, just these top 3 levers for each country on an annual basis, you can have a big significant reduction in marine litter. And the next slide, please. And this is just another slide from that study I mentioned from Food Industry Asia. Really, we identified there were 4 levels of maturity in terms of waste management, and most countries in Southeast Asia should be at what we call system 3 readiness. So, so you move beyond the CSRs, you move beyond the voluntary actions into something much more structured, more mandated, more regulated. Next slide, please. So, in terms of recommendations, the first point, as I see it, in the last few years, there have been many parties involved in trying to deal with the problem in the region, you know, bless their heart, we've got a lot of organizations, national governments, international organizations pouring a lot of money in it. But where I feel the problem is we don't have a coordinating body. So a lot of people are doing many things in different countries, big and small. They don't add up. So unlike the study which I mentioned from Food Industry Asia, you identify from each country what are their key gaps. How do you then coordinate? What does each country need in terms of support, finance, infrastructure, and things like that? Secondly, from there, once you have a more coordinated central structure, you can then properly channel funding and expertise to know which country lacks what and how can we help. The third point is perhaps don't be too fixated with saying, let's do EPR national-wide. You can do a tiered EPR, meaning for each country, and many Southeast Asian countries, you have large cities, your capital cities, but you also have secondary cities. So the large cities with much more critical mass and mature systems, that's where you can start applying and implementing EPR. It will work. For the secondary cities, the rural towns, perhaps EPR might not be ready right now, but you can use a cluster approach and have like a satellite collection centers, recycling centers that can then cater to surrounding communities. And I think that will make a difference. And the next slide, please. And also, I think learning from COVID, the best way to stop a problem or pandemic, I feel right now for plastics, how do you stem it? Which is to then put the hammer down. And in this case, we might even consider a ban or moratorium on new plastics for a period of time, just to allow the old ones, all the garbage to be cleared up. ASEAN is going to explode in terms of the number of people by 2030. I think 750 million people. That means more people will be consuming more plastic waste. And if you don't have all the basic infrastructure in place that I mentioned before, the problem is just going to multiply. It's not going to get better. The fifth point, I think the time has come to look at both regulations and fiscal measures. For so long, the problem has been focused on brand owners, the FMCG brand owners. But if you look at the whole situation, they are neither the producers of the polymer, nor are they the litterers of the waste. So why are they being caught in the middle? So I think the best way is to implement a tax on plastics to do two things. The tax will help to bring up the cost of cheap virgin plastics on par with at least sustainable alternatives, recycled plastics. That will give an opportunity for smaller companies to then be able to afford switching to alternative options. But you also need to have a blanket tax across the region, because if you have one tax in just Singapore, it's just going to drive the manufacturer to a cheaper country in Vietnam, in Thailand, or the Philippines, and the problem is just going to move from one hand to another. So you need a blanket tax for level playing field. And as I mentioned, with UNIA, with the ASEAN Regional Action Plan, we have a perfect opportunity to move beyond voluntary best practices guidelines to something a bit more legal, a bit more mandated, which is what we need. And the last point is similar to climate change, where you have your nationally determined contributions. I hope that from UNIA 5.2 resolution, we can have something similar for plastics, where each country can have their own nationally determined contributions on how and when and what they're going to do in terms of reducing marine debris. And so I go to my last slide. This is what the picture we all want to see, right? ASEAN, Southeast Asia, we're famous for beaches, nice rivers. This is the picture that we want to see. This is the picture where we should be all responsible for helping to produce every day, so that our children, and our children's children can wake up to this view and not to the view that I showed in my opening slides of plastic waste and things like that. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Edwin, for sharing with us, especially your thoughts and recommendations. To quickly move on then to our fourth speaker and final speaker for this session. Now I'd like to invite and welcome Professor Yong Chun Jang. Professor Jang is currently the Professor of Environmental Engineering at the Chongnam National University, a role that he has undertaken since 2003. He's also Policy Advisor in the Korean Ministry of Environment for Resource Circulation Division, as well as being a director at the Daejeon Green Environment Center, supported by the same ministry. He holds many portfolios. He is Vice President and Chair of the International Committee for the Korea Academic Society of Waste Management, and also Associate Editor for the Journal of Material Cycles and Waste Management. Professor Jang received his doctorate from the University of Florida in the year 2000, and he will be sharing with us directions for sustainable plastic waste management and international cooperation between Korea and ASEAN. Professor Jang, please.
Thank you for your kind introductions. Can I share my slides?
Professor Jang, the slides will be put up.
Yeah, can you see my slide?
Yes, we can, sir.
Okay. It's a great honor for me to join this online wonderful forum hosted by the mission of the Republic of Korea in ASEAN. So since I have about 10 minutes, so I try to avoid some replications that other presenters already mentioned, but I'll give you some future framework and directions and how to cooperate internationally in ASEAN region to combat the marine plastic debris. So, as you may know that plastic pollutions by mismanagement practice is the most severe in ASEAN region. So, in 2021, there was an science articles saying that the almost 81% to the marine global plastic waste emitted to the oceans globally coming from ASEAN. So the plastic pollution could be maybe it's a big, huge driver for ASEAN country. On the right hand side, there are 10 top 10 rivers responsible for global marine plastic pollutions located in Asia. So I think there is an urgent need for solving this plastic pollution in Asian country, as other presentations mentions. Second is we are not just plastic pollution. It's not just a waste problem. This mismanagement plastic practice is affecting significantly across the sectors like climate change, CO2 gas emission from plastic industry, open burning, making plastic, and also the economic sectors. And as I mentioned, biodiversity and even food security is also very concerning, and is very alarming due to the contaminated fish eating with microplastics. So those are the all many diverse sectors are being affected by mismanagement plastic waste. And so the reason why we have having this kind of plastic pollutions around the world, especially in Asian countries, because this our current plastic industry or plastic consumption and management heavily rely on linear economy, just mass productions, mass consumptions, and mass disposal. And in 2015, UNEP reported about 80% dumping and landfilling of plastic waste, and then 12% of incinerations, only 9%. But this number is not keep increasing. It's just kind of almost, it's not improving right now. And even in Europe and United States, Japan and Korea, still we are kind of struggling with handling this massive plastic waste and trying to how to establish plastic circular economy. This is one of the top key agenda in policymakers and in our society. So as we mentioned, that we kind of our plastic economy is only very small recycling, and even just a lot of plastic going into the rivers and marines and open dumping and landfill. So we need to gather and then find some good solutions. So how we move to the new way or new direction. So I think that the future framework should be established to the on the right hand side. As you can see, fossil fuel plastic is not going to go away. Maybe in the next 10 years, it will stay maybe 2 or 3 decades. We don't know, but fossil fuel-based plastic economy, right now it's kind of rely on some limited material recycling, but I think a lot of advanced country, European country, Asia, and Japan and Korea, many countries are trying to find a solution how to establish this circular economy for fossil fuel plastic. So I think chemical recycling is one of the solution, and so a lot of research going to the pyrolysis and the PET pyrolysis by using chemical recycling method. And we do not forget about the some reduction of plastic consumption and reuse model and circular plastic production with eco-design should be emphasized and incentivized. And the other direction in the long term, I think a bioplastic should play an important role. Maybe next 20 years, who knows? It's a bioplastic would replace much of a fossil fuel based plastic, which is creating a lot of a problem right now. But still, there are many technical and social and economical barriers, such as economically competitive and efficiency, how to treat the bioplastic at the end of life, and some education. So there's still a long way to go, but I think we should keep in mind that the fossil fuel plastic circular economy should be established, as well as bioplastic also are very important to the new direction. So for future framework should be like right hand side and left hand side should be emphasized. So in order to this plastic circular economy, the regulatory aspect is very important. So legally supporting economic incentive, policy design, and public sector procurements are important. Also, technically, we should continually develop the circular plastic product with eco-design and the research and development technology, especially with recycled content and also the establishing a circular plastic economy. So, and the economic aspect, as I mentioned earlier, is circular business model, like a sharing reuse model, zero waste to shop, and circular collection recycle business should be supported. And also efficient collection, sorting, and processing of plastic waste material with ICT technology also very important. And socially, raising public awareness and establishing circular supply chain at the local levels also are very important by communicating many stakeholders. So those are the some political measures and social efforts we need to move toward the plastic circular economy. In last year, 2020, on December 31st, Korea Circular Economy Action Plan was announced by the national government. And so this K circular economy is designed to achieve zero waste and carbon neutrality and resource circulation by adopting the life cycle approach and engaging all the stakeholders. And So there are 7 key industry sectors. The first one is packaging material, and the second one is plastic. So packaging and plastic, those are the very important key sector to establish a circular economy in Korea by 2030. So right now is packaging and plastic is about 80 to 56 on 81 percent circularity right now, and we will increase by 2030 85% for each packaging sector and plastic sector. And the second one that I want to mention is in 2024 and 2030, for 7 years, we're gonna invest research and development about $500 million to enhance Korea Circular Economy Action Plan for 7 different key industry sectors, as I mentioned. So the last slide that I'd like to mention is international cooperation for solving marine plastic pollution in ASEAN is very important. So I think Korea has a number of very strength policy measures, action plan that we have, and the EPR system we started in 2003. So we have about 20 years experiences of solid waste system by EPR. So I think we can share those are the experiences and knowledge with the ASEAN region, and research and innovation and capacity building for plastic circularity is also very important. So we are willing to help and cooperating this research, innovation, and capacity building as well. And I think also public awareness, education, outreach will be very important to solve this marine plastic pollution. So, and I think for this forum, we do have a good international discussion and knowledge sharing among the ASEAN countries. So I think that this is a good platform to gather and find a solution for plastic waste. And in this coming September 2021, there is a 7th International Marine Debris Conference, as you may know. And among this session, there is one special session, circularity and waste management special session. One of the session is solving plastic pollution in Asia by building international partnership and cooperation. So which I chairing this session. So you're welcome to join and find a good idea and then tackle this marine litter problem. And thank you for your attention. And I'm happy to answer any question if you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Zhang. And we just want to thank all our speakers today for their passionate sharing and also for presenting their various recommendations, policy recommendations that they personally feel would be important for further deliberation as we collectively forge forward to address these issues of concern. And I also want to thank our participants for the many questions that they have put into the chat box, which we will try to address shortly. But before that, I would want to seek your support to help complete a short survey by scanning the QR code that will be put up right now. So if you could just either take a screenshot and then scan the QR code so that you can just help us to complete the survey. We would really appreciate it. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our moderator for the Q&A session. Just want to welcome Mr. Michikazu Kojima, the Senior Environmental Advisor to ERIA. Mr. Michikazu Kojima is an economist specializing in environmental policies, especially waste management and recycling in Asian countries. He currently serves as Senior Advisor on environmental issues at ERIA and leads the Regional Knowledge Center for Marine Plastic Debris, which is the technical partner of the Republic of Korea's mission to ASEAN in co-organizing this forum today. Since 2015, he has also held the position as Chief Senior Researcher at the Institute of Developing Economies under JETRO. He has long been actively engaged in the field of international cooperation and served as a member of the expert working group on environmentally sound management under the Basel Convention and the Technical Expert Committee for Green Industry Platform by UNIDO. His research has been focusing on waste management and resource circularity from a social science perspective. He has been invited as a guest lecturer and visiting professor at many universities in Japan, and he considers very passionately teaching the young generation as one of his vocations. So, as the technical partner for this event, between the mission of the Republic of Korea to ASEAN, Kojima-san will also represent the Regional Knowledge Center for Marine Plastic Debris later on to give the closing remarks. So Kojima-san, I'll hand the floor over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for kind introduction. Yeah, I would like to lead the Q&A session in this event. At first, yeah, we have some questions in the chat box. And I pick up some of them. The first one, I would like to ask the Dr. Liu and Ms. Lim from NUS. We have a question about I would read the kind of a chat box. You recommend the regulations to expand in order to cover other sectors which are major sources of plastic pollution. What types of regulation on these sectors which already exist? And what are their current weaknesses? What gaps do we need to address through new regulations? So, Ms. Liu and Lim, do you have a kind of could you kindly answer these kind of questions?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. For this issue, the idea to raise the point was because we have found quite a few publications in our inventory that discussed economic loss in tourism. For instance, because there was increase in plastic pollution in some tourist sites, then tourists, they were reluctant to visit those places, which caused an economic loss in tourism. But we have seldom found any publication or discussions about whether there is an engagement of tourism industry into, say, the reduction, how to reduce the use of single plastic products in tourism, for instance, in hospitality industry. And so that was why we raised this point. And also at the international level, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, they are promoting more attention and more regulations and guidance to plastics used in agriculture. because including aquaculture, because for instance, films using in agriculture, like which covers the plants. This is an example of a large amount of single-use plastic used in agriculture, but there has not been a global or regional regulations or more guidance on this issue. So this can be one of the weakness, and at the international level and maybe in some regions, governments and organizations, they're working on this.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, next, I have a kind of a question to Memon-san, if possible. The question is how international local agreements and regional plastic policies can be implemented at local levels, and strategies on prevention of policy dilution during ground implementation. Yeah, so Memon-san, could you kindly answer this question about how the international kind of agreements can be implemented in national level or local level?
Thank you. So if we look on the other conventions, like a Basel Convention, for example, that important points, for example, in those conventions are like one is a reporting. And reporting goes from local level to national to the regional or international. Similar to SDGs, for example, that's the easiest one to understand, because the SDGs is a sort of a agreement between all countries to implement by 2030 all the 17 SDGs. So there's at the national level, then there are the focal points for SDGs, or each SDG also separately. Then there are reporting mechanisms, voluntary reporting, and so on. And then also there's a lot of cooperation. One is the international cooperation, as you have seen that like for Basel or for SDGs, for example, like suppose Korea's cooperation to the SDGs support in the different countries, or Japan's cooperation, or China, or other countries, or South-South. So one is the international cooperation. That is very important to help the implementation, or the bid to support the capacity to implement those at the national end. And number two is also to have a stakeholder engagement, because when you're talking about any international like SDGs or Basel, other thing, you come to the private sector, you come to the civil society, you come to the academia. So you have to integrate all the stakeholders, whether they are the part of the, like let's say, put it as a problem, or part of the solution, or the victims, or the beneficiaries, and so on. So you have to identify that how their roles are, and how we can strengthen their roles to support the solution. So I would say that it's easy to look at the different mechanisms like NDCs and like nationally determined contributions for the climate change, Paris Agreement. Again, NDCs from very local level, like energy related NDCs, waste or agriculture related NDCs, and so on. How those NDCs are implemented at the local level, at the national level, reporting back to the UNFCCC, and so on. So I think we have quite many examples which we can easily learn. But as I say, that this instrument will be a little bit upscale type of innovated or a new one. And that will bring also some additionality that how the implementation will be. So it will be a little bit upscale than the current like implementation at the local, national, and international. But we have quite a lot of knowledge already how the other instruments are being implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Memon-san. Okay, I want to ask all panelists about your policy recommendations in kind of a national level or regional level or global level. So I'd like to ask one by one. Professor Tsuchana, Apple-san, do you have any kind of policy recommendation on this issue?
Hello. Yes. Yeah. Can you repeat again, please?
Yeah. My question is kind of a policy recommendation to solve the plastic pollution issue, marine plastic pollution. So maybe you can focus on the kind of the monitoring or kind of the scientific studies on the, I would say, the impact of plastic to the marine ecosystem and so on. So could you kindly elaborate kind of policy recommendation in that kind of field? In addition to other field, you can also mention. Yeah.
Okay, so actually, in terms of, I would like to divide into two parts. One is in terms of policy for scientific data, and then another one is a policies for for societies. In terms of the policy for scientific data, we have to admit that right now, in order to accomplish for management of the plastic waste, we still need quite a lot of data in order to be able to justify what kind of strategies that we could go on. So in terms of policy to implement the monitorings, and also looking at the effects and the consequence of the plastic waste that gonna have on the marine ecosystem or animal or even though human health, these should be implemented definitely. In terms of, as I just mentioned in my speech earlier, is that yes, we need policies, we need a regulation, but also we have to keep in mind that individual itself have to be able to understand and have to change their mindset, change their behavior. So come back into the policies that link to the individual or link to the societies. From my experience, I could see that different nations, different, even though in Thailand itself, different group of people, they're likely to have different behavior and different culture. So what happened is that the policy that gonna have effective for the plastic waste management have to consider those kind of, a difference, behavior difference, culture difference too, in order to meet the goal that we want to accomplish. So hope that,
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. Behavioral change is one of the big issue, and we should understand the differences of behavior in our kind of the in different culture, different kind of behavior and so on. So yeah, thank you very much. Okay, next, Mr. Jong-Yeon Park. Do you have any kind of the policy recommendation?
Thank you. Well, in the case of the Republic of Korea, I think the most important part is to establish the national plan to address marine plastic debris issue. And in order to do that, we have to have a solid data and information on marine debris accumulated for a long time. So the Korean government has been carrying out nationwide marine debris monitoring for more than 10 years. So it allowed us to establish the national plan based on all the data. And depending on the situation, like the international trend and the marine debris pollution level we have, we observe at our coastal area, we change our national plan every 4 years. This is another point which allows the Korean government to address marine debris issue more flexibly. So like the whole things I just mentioned, the part of it, it has something to do with the project we carried out in Indonesia, which is to establish a monitoring system for marine debris to make it possible for the government to establish a national plan to systematically approach each source of marine debris. So our Korean government is putting a huge emphasis on marine debris monitoring system. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Next, Dr. Memon, do you have any additional kind of policy recommendation?
Thank you, Kojima Sensei. Basically, I wanted to make one sort of a clarification, because there was in one presentation the talk about the EPR, because extended producer responsibility is becoming quite interesting, like a policy in many countries. And there was a presentation means sort of admitting that EPR does not get the governments off the hook to provide the waste management services. To me, this is quite a misconception, as EPR is not a physical science, like we say this thickness of plastics is banned or PM 2.5. EPR is more based on the local situations of the governance models, the economic models, and so on. Even many countries, they do not have a producers of like plastics, they are imported and so on. So when we talk about the extended producer responsibility, it incorporates the polluter pay principle. And again, as many countries, the governments they provide many basic services like health, education, but in many countries, it's all delivered by the other service providers, including the private sector. So my request would be to keep the EPR in a perspective from different countries' point of view. Like in France, EPR means all the producers, they can provide the audit, how much plastics is produced, and they contribute towards government like a sort of identified company, and they manage all the recycling. Same in Japan now, like a plastic association is helping on the similar terms. And also if you look on the new Japan's policy of plastics from 2022, where they have put more plastics toward the segregation and so on. So also the Thailand's roadmap to the plastics or ASEAN. So EPR will be very, very interesting, very comprehensive in coming days, and incorporating, as I say, the polluter pay principle, incorporating environmental social governance investments, models, and so on. But we have to be very open, because it will vary from one country to other country. It cannot be replicated as it is from one country to other country. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, next I want to invite Edwin-san. If you have some kind of additional comment on EPR, or if you have some other kind of policy recommendation.
Thank you, Kojima-san. Yes, I fully agree with Mushraq on EPR, and he's right that we should tailor it to the situation in each country and in the region. And for me, the key step is to ensure that the building blocks are in place, which is what I shared earlier, your waste infrastructure, focusing more on transitioning the informal sector to the formal waste collection sector, but also for governments to consider regulations, fiscal measures, as well as mandates that will cut across and that will drive some of these initiatives going forward. So that includes the RAP, that includes UNIA 5.2. So I think those are what I would hope to see in the coming months and the coming years. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Next I want to invite Professor Yon Chan. Edwin-san mentioned about the kind of the waste management in rural area is not good in some ASEAN countries. So, and it's one of the challenge to implement EPR. So, if you have some kind of experience how to expand waste management in rural area in your countries, so do you know a kind of a historical kind of the perspective about how to expand the waste management, waste collection services to rural area? And if you have any other kind of policy recommendation, we also welcome.
Sure. Thanks for asking. And for the EPR system in low income or middle low income country, this one of the challenging tasks to adopt in their solid waste management, especially in for the plastic waste material. I think capacity building and knowledge transfer from Korea, Japan, other country to the low income or middle income country in Asia would be very important. We cannot just replicate our EPR system to the other Asian country, as mentioned, Mr. Mammon, and I totally agree with that. So some kind of a knowledge sharing, capacity building, that's the first step. And then the second step might be some demonstration project of plastic waste management by EPR system. And in each country, they do have a very different waste management policy and then control and behavior. So they are very different. So I totally agree with it. Takes some time to implement fully EPR system in each country. But my second comment is that there might be a very delayed effects of mismanagement practice on marine plastic pollution. So I think we should keep in mind that the first one is how to rapidly do the cleanup and how to minimize this marine plastic or liquids. I think that's the one urgent solution that we need to collaborate and then find a solution. So because there are very limited resources and very limited infrastructure. So I think the first one is we need to find some kind of a big financial support from advanced or international fund. Otherwise, there might be creating more severe problems. So I think a chemical industry producers definitely contribute their cleanup cost by adapting polluter pay principle. And I think that's my second comment. My last comment is in terms of international level, international treaty for plastic management or plastic treat. I think the first component is going to be how to prohibit, how to restrict single-use plastic, from by production. The second one is the collection target or recycling target. How to establish sustainable plastic waste management. That's the one that's a key area. So national implementation plan that we need to develop. And then lastly, I think international corporations should be included in the international treaty. Those are the like 3 or 4 components that definitely we need to include in that future treaty, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Dr. Liu and Ms. Lim, do you have any policy recommendation? Do you have any policy recommendation?
Thank you for the opportunity for us to speak again. We would just like to quickly address one of the questions, which is also an issue we want to raise here. This is the question about whether there is a huge difference between the single-use plastic bans in developed countries or in developing countries. And we mentioned there's a lack of funding for implementation results. Does that mean the implementation is really successful? So the comparison between bans in developed or developing states was not our starting point, because we didn't want to create a different scenario for countries of different economic status. Because even in developed countries, the situation of their single-use plastic bans can be quite different state by state. For instance, in the US, in Australia, some of their states, they have already imposed a ban on single-use plastics, especially plastic bags from supermarkets. But in other states, in those countries, they haven't carried out such bans. So a comparison between developed states or developing states was definitely not our point that we would like to make here. And also for developing states, we have to allow more time and capacity building programs and opportunities for developing states to carry out more activities or programs to target plastic pollution from single-use plastics. And also, does that mean all the implementation was so successful if there was no funding that has gone into this? We don't think like that, because monitoring, surveying, and monitoring of the whole process of implementation, we think that's a very important issue, or like a guarantee for the policymakers to can always go back and adapt and adjust their policies so the policies can work better in the future and to achieve better results. So that's our response to the question, also what we want to mention. And thank you again for the opportunities to speak.
Thank you very much. We already passed kind of the schedule, so I want to make a closing remark. Thank you very much for the all panelists and the speakers. I think the argument is very kind of the comprehensive. I mean, we cover a lot of issues, like from the monitoring and the impact of the to the marine ecosystem, and some countermeasures, including waste management, circular economy, ban on single-use plastics, and so on. Thank you very much for sharing your kind of findings and experiences. We know that we have a kind of the, how to say, a lot of challenges to reduce the plastic pollution and to save our environment. But we need a kind of the international cooperation. We should have a kind of a collaborated kind of actions to reduce plastic pollution. And this is a very good opportunity to have this kind of event, because we just had a kind of the solution to start the negotiations on international treaty on plastic pollution. Thank you very much for your participation. And we will post the kind of the video on our webpage, and also we can share the kind of the presentation file in the link presented in chat box. So yeah, please recheck the presentation file and some video if you want. Yeah, thank you very much for your kind attendance and active kind of the discussion. Thank you very much.